Karen was mid-bite into a juicy brisket sandwich when I tossed the original livestock tags onto her booth table at the farmer's market. The metal clinked against her flimsy paper plate, and she froze, barbecue sauce dribbling down her chin like a slow-motion crime scene. "Is this some kind of threat?" she hissed, her eyes darting around to see if anyone was watching. I just leaned back, adjusted my cowboy hat, and grinned. "No, Karen, it's a receipt." 3 weeks later, her whole Covenant Cuts barbecue empire was mine, and Karen, she was back to typing up passive-aggressive HOA newsletters about the horrors of unapproved garden gnomes. But let me back up and tell you how I turned her shady meat hustle into my own smoked brisket dynasty. My name's Wes Hanley. I'm a fifth-generation rancher with 5 head of cattle, a Ford F-150 that's more rust than truck, and 10 acres of land at the edge of Magnolia Ridge Estates. It's one of those fancy, modern agrarian communities where the HOA bans you from hanging laundry outside because, apparently, clothes flapping in the breeze ruin the neighborhood's visual harmony. I've been here 5 years, keeping my head down, tending my herd, and trying not to ruffle feathers. That is, until Karen Holt Bessinger, our HOA self-appointed lifestyle enhancement chair, decided to make my life her personal project. Karen's the kind of woman who wears pearls to debate mailbox height regulations, and once tried to find my neighbor, Old Man Jenkins, for having garden gnomes that face west instead of east. According to her, it messed with the community's positive energy flow. She'd patrol the neighborhood with a clipboard, measuring grass blades and sniffing out violations like a bloodhound. With a vendetta, most folks just rolled their eyes and paid her fines to avoid the drama. Me, I kept my distance, nodding politely at HOA meetings while she droned on about elevating our communal aesthetic. We coexisted in uneasy peace until Misty went missing. Misty was my prize. Heifer, a black Angus with a white star on her forehead and a personality sweeter than clover honey. I'd raised her from a calf, bottle feeding her when her mama got sick. She'd follow me around the pasture, nuzzling my hand like a 1,100-pound puppy. One morning, I went out to check the herd, and she was gone. No broken fences, no hoof prints leading off the property, no nothing. I spent the day combing the woods, calling her name, checking with neighbors, even driving the back roads in case she'd wandered onto the highway. Zilch. 2 days later, Bessie vanished. Then Ruth. 3 of my best cows, gone without a trace. It was like they'd been snatched by UFOs or swallowed by the earth itself. I was losing sleep, pacing my porch at night, wondering if I'd missed something. Cattle rustling wasn't unheard of in these parts, but there were no tire tracks, no cut wires, no signs of a struggle. My gut told me something was off, but I didn't have a shred of evidence until the HOA's annual summer fun day rolled around. The air was thick with the smell of slow-smoked beef, wafting from a shiny, professional-grade smoker parked beside the community center. A bright red banner fluttered above a booth. Covenant Cuts Premium BBQ. There was Karen, in her starched white blouse and pearls, slicing brisket with the precision of a surgeon and selling sandwiches for $15 a pop. A line of hungry neighbors stretched halfway across the lawn, raving about the locally sourced, grass-fed, organic meat. I wandered over, trying to keep my cool. "Nice setup," I said, watching her carve through a perfectly smoked brisket. "Where do you source the meat?" Karen flashed a smile brighter than a car lot spotlight. "Oh, we found an amazing supplier, grass-fed, locally raised, absolutely organic. The HOA Grill Guild is all about supporting sustainable farming practices. The HOA Grill Guild." Of course, she'd given her little side hustle an official-sounding name. Something about her tone made my skin crawl, but I couldn't pin it down. Then I saw a small, curved scarf on one of the brisket portions, identical to the mark Misty got last spring when she snagged herself on a fence post. My stomach dropped, but I kept my poker face. I bought a sandwich, took one bite, and knew. The marbling, the subtle sweetness from the clover in my pasture. It was Misty. I'd know her meat anywhere. That night, I grabbed my flashlight and followed a hunch. Behind my property, hidden in the tall grass, I found faint hoof prints and drag marks leading from my fence line through the woods to the HOA's maintenance access road. The trail ended at a locked shed behind Karen's pristine colonial-style house, the kind with shutters so symmetrical you'd think they were measured with a laser. I climbed a nearby oak, binoculars in hand, and peered over her fence. My jaw hit the ground. Inside the shed was a chest freezer, a commercial meat grinder, and a stack of butcher paper stamped with the Covenant Cuts logo. Karen was there, directing the HOA board members Bob the treasurer and Susan the secretary like a mob boss. Running the chop shop, they were wrapping cuts of beef, labeling them, and stacking them in coolers. My cows weren't just stolen, they were being turned into Karen's barbecue empire. I drove home, my hands shaking on the wheel. This wasn't just about losing livestock, it was personal. Karen had taken my animals, my livelihood, and turned them into a fundraiser for her precious HOA beautification projects. I wanted to storm her house right then, but I knew better. She was too slick, too connected. The whole board was her personal fan club, and she'd spin any accusation into a sob story about community values. I needed proof, and I needed a plan. The next morning, I went to the monthly HOA meeting, my heart pounding, but my face calm. During the public comment period, I stood up. I'd like to address the recent loss of livestock from my property. I said, 3 cows have gone missing, and I have reason to believe. Karen cut me off with a gasp that could have shattered glass. Mr. Hanley, are you seriously suggesting someone in this community would steal? She clutched her pearls, looking around for sympathy. This is clearly an attempt to derail our successful small business initiative. I think someone's jealous of female entrepreneurship. The room erupted in murmurs. Bob shook his head. Susan scoffed, and one guy in the back actually tutted. I sat down, biting my tongue. They thought I was a crank, a sore loser. But inside, I was already plotting. See, Karen made a fatal mistake. She got greedy. Instead of keeping her operation small, she turned Covenant Cuts into a full-blown business. She filed an LLC, started selling at farmers markets across the county, and even hired a graphic designer for fancy labels and a website. She was posting on social media, bragging about her sustainable barbecue empire, complete with glossy photos of her slicing brisket in her pearl necklace. She added pulled pork to the menu, funny, since nobody in Magnolia Ridge owned pigs. Then came sausages, beef jerky, even frozen meal kits. She was talking about franchising to other HOA communities, dreaming of a Covenant Cuts in every gated suburb from here to Dallas. That's when I saw my opening. I set up a shell company, Hanley Heritage Foods, and contacted Karen as a potential supplier. She was thrilled, practically salivating at the idea of a legitimate source to cover her tracks. We met at a coffee shop in town, where she sipped a latte and bragged about her business savvy. It's all about vision, Wes, she said, leaning forward like she was letting me in on a secret. You have to think big, not just cows in a field. I nodded, jotting notes, letting her talk. Then she let slip a gold mine. She hadn't trademarked Covenant Cuts yet, because the paperwork was so tedious. I smiled, sipped my black coffee, and filed for the trademark that afternoon. For the next 6 months, I played detective. I bought her products at every farmer's market, keeping receipts and photographing labels. I tracked her social media posts, where she posed with a cleaver like some barbecue influencer. I followed her supply chain, discovering she was buying meat from shady wholesalers who didn't ask questions about permits or inspections. Once my cows ran out, she turned to these sketchy sources, passing off that questionable beef as locally sourced. I visited her processing facility, aka her converted pool house, late one night, snapping photos through a window. No proper drainage, no sanitation protocols, just a chest freezer humming next to a kiddie pool filled with inflatable flamingos. The USDA would have a field day. Meanwhile, Covenant Cuts was booming. Karen quit her real estate job to run it full-time. She hired 3 employees, rented a second smoker, and was in talks with a local grocery chain for retail distribution. She was the talk of Magnolia Ridge, hailed as a female entrepreneur breaking barriers. The whole board threw her a celebratory dinner, complete with a plaque for community innovation. I kept my head down, selling eggs at the farmers market and nodding along when folks raved about her brisket. But every night, I added to my dossier receipts, photos, USDA regulation screenshots, even a copy of her LLC filing. Then I struck. First, I sent a cease and desist letter for trademark infringement. Karen laughed it off until her lawyer called, explaining that I owned the name she'd built her brand around. Her face at that meeting was as citrate as a smoked brisket, eyes wide with panic. Next, I filed a complaint with the USDA about her unlicensed meat processing. Turns out, turning your pool house into a butcher shop without proper refrigeration or permits is a federal no. The IRS got wind of her nonprofit HOA fundraiser pulling in 6 figures without declaring a dime. The State Agricultural Board launched an investigation. After I sent them photos of my stolen cows or tags next to Covenant Cuts packaging, the county health department shut down her farmer's market booth when they realized she'd never applied for a food vendor permit. Within 2 weeks, Covenant Cuts was toast. Karen tried to pivot with a vegan barbecue concept called Conscience Cuts, but it crashed and burned when someone found a chicken nugget in their jackfruit pulled pork. The legal fallout was brutal: a $25,000 USDA fine for illegal meat processing, $40,000 in IRS-backed taxes and penalties, and a 5-year ban from food service. The HOA held an emergency meeting, and the community voted Karen out as lifestyle enhancement chair. She stood at the podium, pearls trembling, voice cracking as she tried to spin it as a misunderstanding. Nobody bought it. I swooped in at the bankruptcy auction, buying her smokers, freezers, and even that custom Covenant Cuts banner for pennies on the dollar. With the trademark in my pocket, I relaunched the business legit this time. I got the permits, sourced beef from my herd and other local farms, and followed every regulation to the letter. The grand reopening was a hit. Magnolia Ridge folks love good barbecue, especially when it's not tied to a federal crime. I was tending the smoker when Karen walked by, her face cycling through every shade of fury. "You planned this all along," she whispered. I tipped my hat. "Ma'am, I just wanted my cows back. You're the one who turned it into a federal case." She stormed off, probably to draft a newsletter about mailbox height violations. The court documents arrived last week. Karen owes me $75,000 in trademark damages, plus legal fees. Her lawyer says she's considering bankruptcy. I'm considering a new menu item: Karen's comeuppance combo, with a side of justice and extra sauce. The whole meetings are quieter now. Karen still shows up, still clutching her clipboard, but she steers clear of anything involving food or business. Last week, she tried to ban wind chimes for disrupting the auditory feng shui. I offered to cater the next meeting with my brisket, and the motion failed in record time. Funny how a little beef can solve so many problems. Just make sure it's your beef.